Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm doing fine. I could go for the fastest cancellation in history, but I'm not going to do that today.
What does that mean?
I was already canceled once last week, so
No, that was an attempted cancellation.
I'll save it for later.
That was an attempted cancellation. You survived that.
I once, yeah, right, okay, I survived it. So I'm...
You mean the Isaac Chotiner
I'll survive another
attempt?
one later.
You mean the Isaac Chotiner attempt?
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah, that was a serious, he's no garden variety assassin. That was a serious attempt.
But it wasn't worth his full cancellation. I'm not worth his full powers of cancellation. If this was just a stray shot he took, and if it took me out, fine, but I'm not worth him concentrating.
But John Cook, former editor of Gawker, joined him. I don't know if you saw that, but we can talk about this later.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about it in the Parrot Room, possibly.
Good point.
Which would give us an opportunity to mention that people can support us by going to patreon.com/Parrot Room and get the added benefit of listening to what we say in the Parrot Room.
And I will cancel myself later, either here or in the Parrot Room. It's like that character in South Park they kill off every week. I've already talked about that.
But you got the name wrong the first time. And you will correct that in the Parrot Room. But wait, you mean you're going to say something newly controversial? Say yes.
They killed Kenny, yes.
Okay. So, but let's tell people what's special about this part of the conversation, Mickey. We are taping this right after Trump's speech. This was your idea.
Right.
Can I register a little complaint about how this is playing out? Where I am on the East Coast, it's midnight and I'm tired. And so you are at an advantage being in the western part of the country.
I'm pretty tired myself. So as will become evident. But anyway, the speech was a little disappointing. I tend to, here's the situation. The conventional.
Can I just interject? One disappointing thing about it was, I figured you drink your coffee at the beginning of the speech. You'll still have a little bit of a buzz by the end. No, it was too long.
Yeah. Anyway,
go ahead.
The conventional wisdom is changing even as we speak. From Trump is doomed to Trump can win. Oh my God, he's going to pull it off. The polls show him gaining a little, especially in battleground states. He's now at a 3.7 behind in Real Clear Politics. He's ahead in Wisconsin by a point, according to one poll, behind in another. But he's doing better than he was, and his themes are getting some traction, especially the theme of law and order. He's trying to seem more normal. He hasn't completely fucked up recently in a few hours now, a couple of days. And the convention until now was really pretty good. Pence's speech was very good, very tight. And that's the sort of speech I prefer, a sort of Sarah Palin-esque tight speech that gets in its punches and ends. And Grinnell's speech was excellent, talking about endless wars. And Trump Jr.'s speech was very strong in the traditional. You
did not agree that he was coked up?
I noticed he had beady eyes the second time I looked at it.
Shiny beady.
Aren't eyes always shiny?
These were super shiny. This is like,
well, he was fired up.
You could see yourself in them. Yeah, I didn't even realize that shiny eyes were a sign of coke use. I don't know.
People said that it was like my local government law exam, which was really good. But that was more than coke, Bob. That was meth.
We talked about that last week.
We talked about that last week. So,
although possibly in the Parrot Room. You should have left that in the Parrot Room.
But he didn't write the speech on coke. He probably didn't even write the speech at all. It was a good, solid speech. So we had a few good, solid speeches. Trump's was not a solid speech tonight. It was a rambling thing that was not delivered well in his sing-song voice. There were a couple of times when he seemed to get into it, like when he talked about moving the embassy to Jerusalem and basically said it was a real estate deal, okay? That was like an honest person.
But wait, what was the bullshit about how They were going to spend $1 billion on the embassy. I found a way to do it for $500,000. Who is they? Nobody else planned to move the embassy to Jerusalem until him.
There were probably elaborate plans that were so expensive that they caused people to balk. But but you know, he did deliver the sound bites. He screwed up his best sound bite, which is Biden claps his working class buddies on the back and empathizes with them. Then he flies to Washington and ships their job to China. He stops in the middle of it. Now, maybe somebody in the crowd started yelling at him. There was sort of weird, like, disturbance on the ball field sort of thing.
There were protesters not far trying to disrupt it. And at one point, I thought I heard a successfully loud sound, but.
Yeah, well, that interrupted his best line. But the other lines, he delivered them, but not with particular panache, the way you're supposed to deliver them. Like, but they'll be quoted, and not that many people watch it, so they read the quotes the next day. It was good enough. It was just not spectacular. There was also this one weird thing where he said the White House, and he emphasized the word white. And I expect the left to go berserk over that.
It's probably trolling him.
It's possible he was trolling them. It's possible he didn't know what he was doing. But it was. I look back on it. It was. I don't think it was in my mind. I think he did it.
Then it sounds like it's my job to defend his speech. What I will say in defense of it is, like,
that's 4D chess if I get you to defend his speech.
Well, I won't go quite that far. I will say this about speech in the overall Republican convention. I didn't watch all that much of the Democratic convention, but after watching it, I thought this is going to be hard for Trump, because I assumed the Republicans would do what the Democrats did and hold a basically virtual audience-less convention. And I thought Trump really feeds off of an audience. I don't know how he's going to do if he's alone, but I thought they, in a couple of senses, they did a smart thing. I thought the way they centered, they had the one kind of default place, that auditorium with the pillars, right, where most of the speeches were delivered, and then they would show you videos and stuff. I personally thought that was an improvement on a purely virtual thing. There was a sense that, okay, this convention is located somewhere in space. And plus, I mean, aren't we all sick of virtual life? Do we really want to see another Zoom interface, which the Democrats actually showed us a few times?
Yeah.
Like, right. And they had the weird, like, an actor or actress every night is like, I'm your spokesmodel hosting this. I thought that was super weird. So I basically thought, now, I should admit that I'm a pessimist, and whenever I see the enemy doing anything, I go, oh shit, I think that's going to be successful. So I did watch the convention with that negativity bias. But I thought the convention, I thought, was better handled than I thought it would be by the Republicans as a whole. And as people noted, there were a lot of individually effective, like, videos and so on. And anyway, back to his speech. I thought because they gave him an audience, I didn't think his delivery was bad. It was comfortable. He only flatly screwed up once that I saw and just generated an unintelligible sentence. And Biden did, made at least one mistake himself. He seemed comfortable. It more or less flowed. It was him. I thought it was okay. It just, from the beginning, it just seemed like a laundry list-y speech.
It seemed like they had 4 drafts and they stapled them all together, and he delivered all of them.
Yeah.
I agree with the convention. I think that, and they were conceding this on CNN as we started. He'll get a bounce out of this. Biden didn't get a bounce, and that's one measure of how successful the convention is.
I mean, I'm not.
And I think after this trade of conventions, the Republicans have gained.
I suspect he'll get a bounce, but he may not, because it may be that the reason Biden didn't get a bounce is because basically, and this is partly just life in polarized America, that nobody's persuadable is bothering to watch the conventions. I mean, there are a few persuadables, but maybe there's just not watching the conventions. We'll see. I suspect he'll get a little bounce.
Chuck Todd said, look at his approval rating. I guess that's the easiest thing to move. But he's already moving in Wisconsin, so I don't know. I think there's there's definitely a small amount of room to grow, and he may grow a part of that.
Let me just underscore what you said. So the 3.7 number you cited, the gap between him and Biden, that is the Real Clear Politics battleground states average. It's not a volatile number because it is an average of a ton of polls. A week ago, that was 4.3. A month ago, it was more than 6. Biden had a gap of more than 6 a month ago, and that's when people were saying, oh, I think this is over. Down to 3.7 is a very significant movement, and I think you're right. If he moves a little further, Democrats will be appropriately nervous.
They're already panicked, by some lights. I mean, you can see Nancy Pelosi saying Biden shouldn't debate at all. That would acknowledge Trump as a legitimate president or something.
When did she say that?
Today.
That's stupid.
But she might just have been lowering expectations, but it's also a sign of panic. It might be both. He has these 3 challenges, any one of which could deal him a fatal blow. And he's only 3.7 points ahead. So I thought Trump was doomed, as you know, and I no longer think he's doomed.
I think I was ahead of you on starting to think he wasn't doomed.
You were.
There was 1 week when I kind of agreed that it would take a real kind of stroke of fortune on Trump's part. But when we what are the 3 things? Did you just allude to 3 things that Biden needed to do?
Debate number 1, debate number 2, and debate number 3.
Well, I don't think it's just that, though. That's what's troublesome. We've been talking. Remember when we were talking about the perfect storm Trump would need to win? One of the big things was moving the social disorder issue, exploiting that and playing it in his direction. Now, I believe that there was a time many weeks ago when you were skeptical that he could do that. The conventional wisdom was that social disorder inherently works against the incumbent. I think you were buying that for a while, and I was trying to convince you that if he can convince people it's Democratic mayors, not to mention the fact that the protesters are more associated with Democrats than with Republicans, maybe he could do it. And tonight he certainly played the Democratic mayor's theme. And, Wisconsin, Kenosha is in Wisconsin, and I saw some numbers today where white people in Wisconsin, their opinion of the Black Lives Matter protests has plummeted in the last couple of months.
Also today, Kamala Harris played right into his hands by giving a speech where she emoted in her very annoying way about George Floyd and the more recent shooting in front of his children. And she repeated the line, 3 times in a row. And I'm sure she had a disclaimer about how violence is bad, but it totally made her own the protests in a way that the Democrats should want Trump to own the protests, because as people have pointed out, and there was a huge contradiction in the speech today, he has all the powers of the presidency now. What's he going to be able to do after he's elected that he can't do now? And today he said, I got to wait for the governors to ask me. Well, he's going to have to wait for the governors to ask him after the election, too. You know what the Democrats' asset is that they should exploit?
I had forgotten until this week that Trump, 4 years ago, I think both in the campaign and the inauguration speech, made a big deal of lawlessness in the cities, exaggerated it when in fact things weren't bad crime-wise, but he made a big deal of it. And he promised that he would solve the problem. I mean, these quotes are as plain as day. I am going to restore order to the cities and blah, blah, blah. And I think the Democrats should cut a commercial tomorrow saying he promised to do it. He's had 4 years.
When was this?
I think it was part of the American Carnage theme in the inauguration speech. I mean, the American Carnage thing went beyond that. I think maybe it was, but I know for sure I heard a quote somewhere this week from 4 years ago. I'm not positive whether it was during the campaign or the inauguration. And I'll try to remember where I heard it. Yeah, I heard it on some podcast, and I'll retrieve it. But it's there, and they really need to use it to do a kind of jujitsu on this social disorder thing.
He's obviously going to if he has a brain, and he does, or the people around him have a brain, he's going to come out in the next day, probably in the next few hours, with a big statement criticizing, again, he already issued one statement, violence and calling for, law and order in the cities. That's sort of his traditional position. So why shouldn't he adopt it now that he has to do it? So, and Trump anticipated that tonight. He said, "It's too late, Joe. It's too late."
Right.
Well, that's like saying it's too late for Trump to get over his mishandling of the coronavirus. No, it's not. It's never too late. It's not too late.
Yeah.
Trump has, I don't think Trump has successfully overcome his mishandling of the coronavirus, but, you would think that looking at this thing today and at this convention, I think Biden can more successfully overcome his, party's seeming embrace of the forces of lawlessness.
But he needs to hurry. He needs to be clear soon, and they really need to cut the commercial I'm talking about.
He needs a new vice presidential candidate, too.
He also needs to, a little late for that. He needs to, he needs to talk to these Democratic mayors and say, do me a favor here.
Right.
Get
very
tough.
Good point.
And then he needs to be able to take credit for that, right? It needs to come out.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point.
That he talked to them and say, I can do this and Trump can't. I can talk to these people.
That's what FDR would have done. Harry Hopkins had the number of every mayor in the country on his telephone list. He would just call them all and tell them to get in line.
Now this,
that's a very good point. I don't think it even needs to come out. I think there are a couple of things. First, his basic story that although first that CNN going berserk about law and order yesterday was the canary in the coal mine. I mean, they said, "Oh my God, he's got to say something," and that was surprisingly astute on the part of CNN. So give them points for that.
Wait, what did they say? I missed that.
Don Lemon was saying, that I forget what he said, but he was acutely aware that Trump was making sense on the law and order issue, and it was having an effect in the polls.
Okay.
And the Democrats were back on their heels, were being rocked back on their heels, and they better do something fast. So basically what we're saying now. And for Don Lemon to say that, I mean, he's not a stupid guy, but he doesn't usually say what he really thinks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, we don't know what he really thinks, but he doesn't.
I think he was much more conservative.
Like
I think he was much more conservative a few years ago.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I got to ask, what'd you think of the Melania thing? I mean, last week I said I thought Jill Biden is a real asset for Joe because she's like this, very human, she's a teacher. I thought she's great. And I contrasted her with Melania, who I think I said is like this kind of brooding Eastern European mystery alien woman. Now, the brooding part wasn't there in the speech she gave, but what's the deal with the dictator's wife dress? I mean, she just really, did you see her dress?
No, the dress didn't bother me. You like the one today better?
Much better.
You can see that from outer space.
What did you think of her speech? I again thought she just comes off as an alien being. I'm sorry, especially wearing the weird fascist dress.
Her speech to me was like those big ads that the North Koreans used to take out in the New York Times, where there were like pages and pages of verbiage, and you just couldn't understand any of it. It was delivered too quickly. Her accent is too thick to penetrate, for my mind to penetrate, and she didn't emote at the right parts. But I have nothing but goodwill for her. I mean, she didn't seem evil. She was trying to do her best. It was better than last time, which was plagiarized. So, it was fine. It didn't hurt him. It didn't help him. It was something he had to do. I actively dislike Ivanka. I mean, I think she's, completely phony, and she's what a PR person would do to a liberal who was trying to, make her further her ambition by being Trump's daughter. And as Ryan Girdusky said, she was the worst Trump kid that spoke. Everybody else was better. Even the in-law.
Yeah, it was a bad 1-2 punch. I mean, her and Trump, both of their speeches just kind of washed over me. It was like, I've heard this before. There's nothing, whereas there had been speeches, you're right, Pence's was one of them, that had some real bite.
You didn't like Grinnell with the endless wars?
I didn't hear Grinnell's speech. I'm in favor of course, I mean, I think Trump, look, he's had 4 years and he hasn't ended one war, so it's total bullshit, but he can't pull the trigger.
He hasn't started a war.
Well, he hasn't started a war. I mean, he brought the ISIS thing.
That sets him apart from the pack.
Well, but he's come close to starting a war with Iran. He has made things much worse on the Iran front. And by the way, the claim tonight, I mean, I'm not going to do what's his name, Daniel Dale, the fact checker, but I'm not going to do the whole thing. But in terms of dubious claims, he said, quote, the first Middle East peace deal in 25 years. A peace deal is when there is a state of conflict and peace ensues. You know, Israel was not in a state of conflict with UAE. They were just formalizing a de facto alliance. And if anything, it made Palestinian peace more remote. But you know, he's made things, I think, more precarious in the Middle East, and he just can't fight the blob when push comes to shove. He can't get those troops out of Syria. He wants to, but he can't. Can't get them out of Iraq. Hasn't gotten them out of Afghanistan. He's had 4 years.
He wants to is the key. I'm not sure a lot of people, either in his party or certainly in the Democratic Party, have the desire. So
then he has proven that he cannot even get things done that he wants to do. That's what this proves.
Well, I think it's hard to do. I don't think he has an excuse for troops still being in Syria, but and some of them were killed just the other day. But Afghanistan is tricky because the Taliban's going to win if we pull out of Afghanistan, and nobody wants to face that. It's like Vietnam,
right?
But Syria is going to be a mess whether we're in or out. So
did you see the video of us and the Russians having that weird jockeying of like armored personnel carriers?
No, I didn't.
It's gripping. It's gripping.
Really?
It's like,
I'll have to take a look at that.
Oh, it was like I think they even bumped each other. It's like we were trying to cut them off and they were it was unclear, but it's amazing video.
I live across, maybe this is a parrot room discussion, but maybe not. I live near a major peace activist. Super left-wing, super...
Name names.
Peace. No, I'm not going to name names. That would be a violation of
privacy.
privacy.
Name them in the parrot room.
I'm not even going to do that, but...
Say that you will name them in the parrot room so that people will give us money.
But she said, Trump doesn't like wars. What can I say? I like that. You know, Biden once said we're going to bomb them into peace, okay? Trump doesn't seem to have an instinct to start wars. Give him credit for that.
Actually, Biden is interestingly ambivalent. He apparently opposed the Libya intervention. He opposed, and Trump has used this against him. He opposed the bin Laden raid, but that demonstrates that he is kind of risk averse. He is actually closer to being a non-interventionist than the foreign policy people he's surrounding himself with, unfortunately. And they are, of course, going to carry the day because I believe Wasn't
Blinken a big advocate of withdrawing from Iraq, which I didn't even support, and was a disaster. But
I wasn't aware of that, but Blinken has already said we need to leave troops in Syria so we'll have leverage over the regime.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, that's so disappointing.
Yep. Good piece by Emma Ashford in the New York Times summarizing the causes for concern about Biden's foreign policy.
And the other thing that I thought is they're making a big deal about how Trump has this narrative where everything was going fine and then the pandemic hit and we want to get back to just where it was before the pandemic hit. That is plausible to me. My number one thing is, were wages at the bottom growing? And they were. They were growing pretty smartly until the pandemic hit. And, it takes a while, and Obama contributed to that. Obama had 8 years of growth, and Trump had 2 more, and eventually the growth becomes, the labor pool shrinks enough, and even though immigration is stable, it's not growing the way it normally would. So eventually the demand for workers outstrips the supply and employers started raising wages. And that really was just was happening. And that's why one of the reasons it's such a disaster that the virus hit, but it's a plausible argument for him to make.
Sure, but immigration wasn't growing under Obama either. You would concede that, right? Immigration wasn't growing under Obama. So that part of the dynamic was also long-standing.
I think it was the illegal immigration was at a much higher level. The legal immigration was constant. But
I thought number of people detained at the border had dropped relative to the Bush years.
It picked up the last 2 years of Obama, and the real drops were in the Bush years, I think. The high point was 2000.
By the way, you seem to have spent this evening tweeting your disappointment that Trump and other people were not mentioning borders more often.
That was overtaken by events. He
finally got to your pet subject.
He mentioned them 2 or 3 times in the 2 or 3 drafts of the speech that he read. They were in there a couple times, so that was fine. There was just no. There were not enough killer lines. I mean, I thought the whole point, and maybe this is old fashioned. I mean, I thought the whole point of speeches is you come up with that killer line that people are going to remember, and that throws a net over your opponents. And
how about Biden says he opposes the forces of darkness, but he can't even keep the lights on. The trouble
it was okay,
but the audience was so charitable that Trump really thought these were like killer lines.
Yeah, but the killer line was he claps you on the back in Pennsylvania and empathizes and flies to Washington and sends your jobs to China, and that's the one he fucked up.
I'm sorry to hear that.
But anyway, so I think this narrative that they finally hit on is a good narrative. The problem is that he fucked up the pandemic response, and there's also a parallel between him fucking up the pandemic response and I think in the Democrats fucking up law and order, which is it's not completely clear. Are you convinced that he could have done a lot more to make the pandemic better in America?
Oh, yeah.
Stopping the flights from Europe. What else?
Well, no, not just first of all, the thing with Europe is the problem wasn't so much the policy as the execution, and this is just.
I think the policy was even late.
Well, okay, but once they supposedly were taking the flights from like Italy seriously, I know from more than one firsthand account of people's experience, nothing was actually happening at the airports. Right. People would fly in from Italy and nobody would say anything to them.
And he boasted tonight about how airtight it was.
Yeah, but no, it's the opposite of the case. And it's a case of his incompetence slowly just eroding the government's capability to do things.
It's the government's incompetence. And a competent president would have ridden herd on them.
Exactly. Who knows
even
which,
even that wouldn't have been enough. But
it would have helped a lot.
It's not that his competence perverted a competent government.
It would have helped a lot. Also, the fact that he, as we've discussed, he basically, when they finally came out and said, "Okay, we're encouraging people to wear masks," he basically said, "Actually, I'm just kidding." He said, "I'm not going to wear a mask," at that very press conference. And he has since then, repeatedly, he's been on the side of people who reject the whole idea that there's a pandemic to worry about.
But my point is, you get points for seeming to be in control and seeming to have a plan, even if the plan turns out to be wrong. Then you can adjust it and admit you were wrong, which he doesn't do a whole lot. But
he's failed to do that too.
And so Cuomo has high ratings, even though he made the stupidest decision of any politician in America.
Even though the two components
seems to have a plan.
Right. The two things Cuomo did was emote about the need for billions of ventilators that turned out to be unnecessary, if not in some cases counterproductive, and encourage people to return to nursing homes where they got sick and died.
But I think the Democrats, somebody could do the same thing with law and order, even if they didn't have a plan for restoring law and order, just to seemingly at least want to do it and have a plan.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Trump, there was no sense on the pandemic that hey, our government is on top of this. Just there's a lot of ways to convey that. And that could have included actually having a better plan and refining it and telling people what's going on. I mean, I was listening to Alex Madrigal on the radio today. He was on Terry Gross, and he and his colleagues, I guess, at the Atlantic have set up this COVID tracking site that I follow. And as he pointed out, the CDC still does not have like an official government stats site that's accessible to us. That's crazy.
The Wright claims that they found a hidden agenda on the COVID tracking site. I don't know what it was. I forget what it was, but
it's funny because their estimate of deaths is lower than what you're hearing from Johns Hopkins.
Yeah, I didn't think the guy was that impressive, but the key thing they never explain is you test, you isolate, but you're still vulnerable to any outside threat. I guess the theory is if you catch all the threats quickly, then you survive until what? Until the virus just goes away because the RO, or do you have to survive until there's a vaccine? Or
we don't know for sure. I mean, there is still this idea that herd immunity is much lower than we thought. I actually didn't realize until this week that one scenario where it's lower than we thought. I mean, we've talked before about these T memory cells. Some people don't have antibodies, but they have T memory cells. I didn't realize that in one scenario, a lot of people have those just from the common cold, because exposure to common cold, because that's a coronavirus and it has certain things in common with this. So it could be that 40% of people have T memory cells that are at least somewhat effective. We don't know, but my final complaint, my final little fact-checking thing is when Trump says, we produce the vaccines faster than anybody thought possible. The warp speed program, I think, is not a bad idea, but it has no effects, as far as I can see, on the pace of developing the vaccine. What it does is incentivize several different companies to go ahead and mass produce a bunch of the vaccines in a way that the market alone would not incentivize them to do until they were more confident of the success.
And are they not using Bill Gates' money? They're using the government's money?
Right. That's how Trump has spent several billion. He has guaranteed several companies that the federal government will pay them for like 100 million vaccines, regardless of whether the vaccines turn out to be effective.
And
now,
Madrigal saying today on Terry Gross that you have to nationalize the companies. I don't think you have to nationalize the companies. I don't think he's nationalizing.
No, I think the warp speed program is having a real effect. I don't know what the virtue of nationalizing them. I don't know what he has in mind as the virtue of that. I mean, maybe he could talk me into it.
His analogy was to the Liberty ships in World War II, where I guess the shipyards were nationalized. But I don't think anybody has much faith that if you nationalize a production business, it's going to be more efficient than if it's in private hands.
No, the incentive of them to develop the vaccine seems to have been intrinsically strong. I don't know what he would do.
I'm amazed. I'm amazed they haven't given Elon Musk, said, here, you take it over. I guess he doesn't want it.
Elon Musk is like a pandemic truther.
Yeah, he doesn't want it.
He thinks the number of deaths is hugely exaggerated. He thinks it's 50% a lie or something.
Right.
So he would be a bad choice.
He would be a bad choice. Okay. There's two themes that Trump didn't hit. One is there's this song that I don't really like that much called You're a Big Girl Now. It's a guy who loses his young girlfriend and he goes, I can change, I swear. That's the big line.
That's always a line.
And Trump didn't even try to say, I can change, I swear.
No.
But he also didn't really even try the line, you may not like me, I may be crude and rough. I mean, Ivanka tried this.
Ivanka did that for him, yeah.
But I don't think she did the job, but nobody said, I may be a son of a bitch, but I'm your son of a bitch. Which I actually think is not a bad line for him to take.
I would go with asshole.
There was a whole
I think he should have said, I may be an asshole, but I'm I'm your asshole.
Well, what was
Sorry.
What was this? There was a whole South Park movie that was based on this distinction. We're assholes, but the rest of the world is something worse. And I forget what the something worse was, but
worse.
So he could adopt that.
See, this is the trouble with taping this late at night. I start laughing at asshole jokes. I'm getting a little punchy.
So are we?
Just quick. Well, can we talk about the shooting in Kenosha? I mean, this is a serious, when you've got one of these kind of quasi militia members or whatever we want to call this guy. What is it? Kyle Rittenhouse. What's your line? I mean, I think
I don't know what the line is. I don't like 15-year-olds running around with AK-47. 17? No, I don't like 17-year-olds running around with AK.
I don't even know if it's legal. I mean, 17?
And I don't think you help matters by having that. But on the other hand, there are videos of this guy getting whomped on by the skateboard guy who was described on NPR as a happy-go-lucky guy who just loved to skateboard. Yeah, but in the video, he's beating this guy around the head.
Okay, so I missed
with a skateboard, and then the guy shot him. But I don't know what went on before then. Maybe this Kyle guy was menacing people, so that's why he got hit with the skateboard. So I just don't know. But I don't think we know the full story.
No, we don't. But I want to see that video because the New York Times did a pretty good play-by-play today, where they described there were two phases of the shooting. So there's the one you described, and then, so he's then being pursued by these guys, and my hat's off to him. My own policy is when there's a guy with an AK-47 who just shot somebody and I don't have a gun, I don't chase them. But anyway, people were chasing him, they knocked him down, and he shot one of them or a guy who was like stepping over him. He's not the guy who knocked him down. But the Times, although they described the first shooting as if they had seen a video, they didn't show us the video. And I haven't seen it. So you've seen it? And it's a guy beating up on him?
I've seen a still from it. I haven't seen the actual video.
Okay. So the Times.
He killed the skateboard guy.
And he killed the second guy. By the way,
But why were they chasing him? That's what I don't know. What was the first? Was he behaving badly that they were chasing him, or they were just chasing him because they were happy-go-lucky skateboard guys?
He kind of had the look of somebody who, notwithstanding the AK-47, you didn't have to take seriously. He's this 17-year-old, not super jockey looking. In fact, you can see how, if you want to get all empathetic about it, you can see how he wound up having this obsession. Adolescents always try to find the place where they can make their mark, and I don't think his was going to be on the athletic fields of America. So I can imagine him. I can imagine, I don't know if the skateboarder was an Antifa guy or whatever, but just not taking this guy that seriously and kind of, but I don't know what happened. I will say I am not a fan of open carry laws, and this is now at least 3 deaths during these protests attributable to open carry laws. In Austin, it was the guy who was open carrying who got killed, but he wouldn't have gotten killed, I'm pretty sure, if he hadn't had that gun.
And of course, one point that the left makes that I think is definitely true is blacks who open carry very often wind up getting killed. So, it sort of gives the light of their cause it points out a weak spot in their cause.
Well, the Kenosha cops, you saw the part before the shootings where the cops at the Kenosha cops are saying, hey, thank you guys for helping out these guys with guns and giving them bottles of water. Now, meanwhile, the police chief is saying we don't approve of these vigilantes, but the cops themselves are encouraging these guys.
I didn't know that.
Not good, if you ask me. Yeah.
At least they didn't give them cookies like Mrs. Kagan.
Hey,
so
careful.
The answer is,
I'm going to have a dialogue with her husband before long. We're suspending our.
He's a very smart guy, and he came up with the surge, and the surge worked. So I give him points for
Wait,
that.
Was it him or his brother or father?
He just said, yeah.
It was a Kagan. I don't think is he the Surge Kagan.
I thought he was the Surge Kagan. Anyway, the surge was a good idea, turned out. No, I'm very unprepared, and this is my cancellation, which is I have a friend who used to go on, a female friend who used to go on a national news program, and she said, I'm unprepared. And I said, well, just for every book you haven't read that you were supposed to have read, you just have to unbutton one more button on your shirt and nobody will care. And she tried it and it worked. So
wait, who said that? Who said that to her?
I said if you're unprepared, you just have to unbutton.
And so now you're unbuttoning your shirt, hoping it'll work for you.
And my shirt is unbuttoned, which indicates
that you don't understand the principle that was at work. That's what it illustrates.
I'm a swinger, and B, I'm wildly unprepared to talk about.
Is there a
Kenosha.
pool boy? Is there a pool boy in your room?
Giancarlo.
Are you that much of a swinger? And
No.
Hey, here's the thing about these. Is this parrot room? No, we don't have to say this. But I just think it's interesting that both Jimmy Swaggart and this guy remind me. See, it's so late. Remind me of this guy's name. You know, the junior, the
Jerry Falwell.
Jerry Falwell. Thank you.
They
had this thing about non-interactive sex. Remember, Swaggart would pay prostitutes to undress with about 10 feet away from him and masturbate. And then this guy seems to have gotten off watching his wife have sex with a pool boy. What is it? What is it about? I mean, if you're going to have a scandal, enjoy it.
Well, isn't that the exact definition of being a cuck? I think that is the exact definition of being a cuck.
Watching your wife have sex with another guy would seem to fall under the broad umbrella of being cuckolded, yes.
But I think there's an actual cult of this particular
Well, it is
obsession.
a fetish. It is a fetish.
I don't understand it, but I don't I don't understand that, and anything else I have to say about it is going to be said in the parrot room.
Okay, I will. I do have to ask you about this tweet by your friend Ann Coulter about Kyle Rittenhouse. I think you know what I mean. Somebody tweeted, I want Kyle Rittenhouse as my bodyguard, and she tweeted, I want him as my president. Now, that's in pretty bad taste. He had just killed 2 people.
I condemn it. No, what am I supposed to say?
Say you condemn it and we'll never speak to her again.
No, I condemn things all the time.
Will you convey my condemnation of it to her next time you see her?
Yes.
I know I can trust you.
Because you're allies on endless wars now. So you have, look at Trump. If you just take the basic building blocks of Trump, okay, no endless wars, trade deals to bring jobs back home, those are not objectionable or unpopular ideals, nor are they anti-democratic ideas. Those are basic Democratic Party pillars. So you should be this horseshoe thing.
So if he weren't completely incompetent, he'd be a good president? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that there should be room for the so-called horseshoe option where the left and the right join at the populist bottom. That's a pretty damn solid basis for building that option. Jobs in America, especially manufacturing jobs, and no endless wars. That doesn't mean you don't trade, doesn't mean you don't have relations with the world, doesn't mean you're isolationist, but it does reject the neocon fetish about being involved in the world and being a player and having influence and being engaged. Engaged is the word.
Well, as a political matter, it could work, but the problems are, again, he can't actually get the jobs done. He's incompetent.
No. But the argument is that there's more than just his incompetence. It's that there are these issues like immigration and culture wars and abortion that get in the way and make this impossible. And I don't know, why do you have to talk about them? I guess you do have to talk about immigration a bit.
Wait. You're asking why talk about immigration? You're asking that question?
No, I guess I think you have to talk about immigration. But
I think you do think that, yes.
But But you can, I don't know, I'm about to commit heresy. Maybe you can say something like, we have to get control of it, you know? And we have to stop the crazy lefties who want unlimited immigration. We have to stop the...
Nobody does. I mean...
a couple
of years ago...
Matt Iglesias has written it several times. I think he just basically has written a book about it.
About
and Farhad Manjoo was for open borders. What he thought was open borders.
Really barely open borders. Any actual Democratic politician has ever been for truly
They've gotten
open
pretty
borders.
radical. They got so radical that the America's Voice, which is way too radical for me, started freaking out and saying, oh, my God, we better say something that implies we do want some limits.
There was that moment when Castro in the early Democratic debates said, raise your hand if you're for decriminalizing illegal immigration or whatever it is. And like they didn't know what to do. And some of them put up their hands and like that. He wasn't doing the party a favor.
But it turned out that everybody thinks that means open borders. But I think that was just a little technical change in the law that wouldn't have affected much at all, but had deep symbolic influence. Anyway, you're right. I can't. There's not a completely neutral package of horseshoe policies that you could try out, but that's just a huge solid basis that wasn't there 2 months ago, Bob. The Trump outlined in his speech today, on which a left-right coalition could be built.
Well, in principle, but the other problem you'd have is the tax policies he has embraced. Look, he hasn't. If you really wanted to make a play for really securing more voters who now are inclined to vote Democratic, you'd have to have a more progressive tax policy. You'd have to actually get serious about health care. Another area, by the way, where he talked a good game during the campaign, he's just incapable of getting shit done.
You could easily do that. That's not a theoretical problem.
I think there's no doubt.
That's not a problem that's raised by people who argue against this option. Yes, they have to have a serious health care policy, and it's very easy to go after the carried interest loophole and not to propose the regressive tax cuts on the top. On the other hand, the basic structure of the main part of the tax reform law was designed, however indirectly and however long term, to bring American investment back home. So you could argue that the core of it was an American first tax reform. It was stupid to emphasize over a bunch of other things, and it was it pleased the Beltway class. But it's not completely anomalous. Democrats propose similar reforms to bring money back home.
I think there's no doubt that the current party structure is unstable, and for more than one reason. In other words, theoretically, there is an opening for realignment, and one reason is because, look at the Democratic coalition. It's almost a little bit inherently unstable. One virtue that one practical advantage the Republicans have now is that they're just more homogeneous.
No, that's crazy. They're about to split in two. We have 100 former Bush administration officials and Romney campaigners supporting Biden. So if Biden wins, are they going to go back to the Republican Party and say, hey, we're here now, can we restart the old Republican Party?
No, those are elites.
Are they going to be excommunicated?
Those are elites.
I hope they're excommunicated.
Those are elites. The base is more homogeneous than the Democratic base. First of all, ethnically, that's obvious. And you yourself have claimed that within the Democratic base, the ethnic diversity creates differences of interest. You want more black Democratic voters to decide that immigration is a threat to them, right?
Right.
Okay, so that would be an instability within the Democratic base.
I want more Hispanic Democratic voters to decide there's immigration.
Well, that's inherently less likely because they are some of them are immigrants or related to them.
But they are the hardest hit by illegal immigration.
What, the Hispanics?
Economically, Hispanics who are already here are the hardest hit because they're likely to, because they're the first generation especially, to hold the jobs the illegals are taking, and B, their special skill that they have to sell people is bilingualism, But hey, the immigrants have that, the illegals have that skill too. So,
anyway.
this is straight George Borjas, that the main group that is hit hardest by illegal immigration is existing Latino immigrants.
But as a practical matter, the Latino vote is a much tougher get for you being somebody who wants
Trump is there's signs that Trump is getting a little bit of both of them, and he's going to get a much bigger percentage of the Latino vote than the black vote. If he gets 15% of the black vote, it'll be a huge success. If he gets 30% of the Latino vote, it'll be a failure. I mean,
but another illustration of what I mean is kind of like, I last week I was talking about at the Democratic convention. The keynote address consisted of 16 different speakers saying little things. As I said, 10 of them were identified as non-white. And I mean, they actually identified as non-white. Like the guy would come on and say, I'm from the Navajo Nation.
Right.
And I remember thinking like, when he comes on and says, I'm from the Navajo Nation, now there are a lot of Democratic elites who think, yeah, this is great. We're the party of diversity. But if you look at the base, how many people go, yeah, I'm with you, brother. I'm from the Navajo Nation. No, they're not. I mean, they're different. Whereas you see the average, Republican voter, they look at each other and yeah, they look like me. I'm not saying you should vote on that basis.
There was a huge conscious effort to Jaredize the party and have a lot of black faces and talk about
but that's a lie. I mean, that's not the base. That's not the base right now. And it was smart. It was smart.
He's having surprising success among black young men, apparently. But I am interested in what happens if will there be a Republican Party crack up? I hope there is. Are they going to let all these people who went over to Biden, like this Miles guy from DHS, back in the party? I hope not. I hope they're shot out of both parties and wander in the wilderness without a home and then disappear and are absorbed into the earth like a toxin. How about that?
Okay. Like a toxin.
Well, they're neocons, Bob. I would think you wouldn't like that.
There's a version of realignment I'd like to see. It's different from yours, but one thing we have in common is I think we'd both be happy to see a less interventionist.
Well, they're interventionists
policy.
and they want to dismantle privatize Social Security, so they're both toxic viewpoints.
I'll take your word for that.
I've canceled myself twice now. Jeez.
Now, what do you? Has the NBA decided they're going to play after all?
I don't think they've restarted. I think they're in the process of changing their mind back to playing. Yeah.
Okay.
Once there's, in addition to calling the Democratic mayors, Biden should call the leaders of the NBA and tell them to get their act together.
I mean, maybe they've gotten the message that this could play into Trump's hands, right? If there's no. If sports are growing to a halt.
So if the Republican base is really just non-interventionists and they want to bring jobs home, and the Democrats are split between the lefties and they also want a health care plan, blah, 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 and the lefties and the sort of moderates who aren't on board with the lefties, why can't the Democrats take the moderates and make a majority party?
Wait, say the first part of that again. I'm sorry. My mind is late here.
Both parties are
yeah.
Yeah, both parties are split, but you say the Republicans are the base basically wants, they're basically populists. They want to bring the jobs home. They don't want to intervene in wars. The base of the Democrats, they want populist control of immigration. And why can't they take that message and steal half of the Democrats that aren't AOC diversicrats, diversity advocates, and win? That's 60% of the electorate.
Why can't the Republicans steal more votes?
Or the Democrats steal all the Republicans. It doesn't matter. It's like a merger. You don't need to. Doesn't matter whose name is on the top. There's 60% of the vote there.
Okay, but again, the Republicans would have to transform important parts of their policies. This huge tax cut for the rich, no, won't work. You have to provide health care.
The tax cut is just as an elite
phenomenon. The point is
there's not a huge groundswell of support for the tax cut among the Republican base. Nobody cares about it. That's why they didn't mention it very much today, because it's just not a big issue to voters. It's a big issue to the elite. So you don't do it. Jettison it, along with all the 60 Bush staffers who are running for Biden. The healthcare thing too.
You agree that Republican elites, as they are now structured, are what's keeping the Republican Party from making the play you would like them to make. So my question is, what is it on the Democratic side that's keeping them from making the play? In other words, attracting more white, relatively low wage workers or whatever that would allow them to completely seal the deal. Is it mainly just atmospherics, like talking a lot about identity politics?
No, and at some point they just completely, well, at first they sort of decided they could jettison the working class entirely. I mean, Tom Edsel and Ron Brownstein have written about this. Edsel skeptically and Brownstein enthusiastically. They're the coalition of the ascendant. They don't really need the working class anymore in the future. And
they don't need the white working class.
The white working class. And the second thing is that at some point, they gave themselves entirely over to the ethnic activists and identity politics in a very stupid way. But they've done it, and it's hard for them to go back. I mean, the leader of the hero of the groups that I associate myself with was Barbara Jordan, who led the Jordan Commission, which was put in motion by President Clinton, and advocated a fairly tough immigration policy. And there's no way that they can, in the current incarnation, go back to the Jordan Commission. And the drive, the underlying sex drive that's underneath this all is, if only we let in enough of them, we're going to have a Democratic majority well into the future. So it's tough to give up your sex drive.
Mickey, can I read a comment from one of our viewers? Now, this is a Patreon patron, and normally I might reserve reading comments like this for the Parrot Room, but I think it's relevant. Hi, Bob and Mickey. Longtime superfan here. I have 2 recommendations which are related. 1, keep both videos, meaning the regular podcast and the Parrot Room, to 45 minutes each. 3 hours is overwhelming. People will be more likely to pay if you give them less of the free version and less of the paid version. Let's leave aside the merits of this proposal. I do think tonight, since it's 1 a.m. my time, it may be a good night to hold this podcast to under an hour, which probably, I didn't even know.
It's 58 minutes right now.
So we're going to have to hurry and then move on to taping the Parrot Room.
I'm always for that.
Okay, quickly, I do want to add, viewers, listeners have compared us to a number of pairs of people, starting with the Odd Couple, and you and I have sometimes disagreed over who is who. I just wanted to, this entry has actually been around a while. I've been meaning to read it, but here's the comment. I delight in these, meaning our dialogues, I think. There's a whiff of Lucy and Ethel about the proceedings. Which one would you be?
It's a good question.
It's a tough one.
Can I be Ricky Ricardo?
I'm afraid that's not an option.
He was cool.
But I think anyone in their right mind would say that I am a little more reminiscent of the irresistibly sexy Cuban band leader than you.
Okay. I think we're like a rock and roll band, and I will reveal that rock and roll band in the Parrot Room. And you will not know what I'm talking about.
You think there's going to be a musical allusion you're going to make that I don't recognize?
Correct.
That's almost certain to be the case.
And it's even a pretty lame one. You still won't recognize it. That's how lame you are.
Okay. Ooh.
Okay.
I'm really fired up about this.
If I recognize it and you don't, I mean, I'm not that hip, right? So
I would never say that. On the other hand, I'm not disagreeing with you. Yeah. So okay. So we'll be back next. So this will be up. Well, why do we need to tell them? By the time they hear it, it's obviously up. Anyway, We're taping this Thursday night. It'll be up Friday late morning, we hope. And we'll be back next week. Even if you're not a patron, we'll be back. And we appreciate everyone, right?
Yes.
Okay. Just final thought. Wait. Just affirm this. So, what was the consensus? I think 6-8 weeks ago. It was a virtual consensus. I questioned it, but it was a virtual consensus among pundits, right? Social disorder inherently hurts the incumbent. That's dead now, right?
So good. It sure seems dead, but I've been wrong before.
That'll do.
But
all right.
But I never bought into it. I thought it was that maybe there was a situation like with George H.W. Bush and the Rodney King riots where people would say it's not enough to be for law and order. We actually sympathize with the rioters and we need to solve this problem. I thought that they were getting a lot of sympathy. The sympathy now seems to have evaporated. So. Okay.
I do think I could go find a conversation I could go find some videotape where you seem to be much closer to embracing that now discredited consensus than I was.
But in my heart of hearts, I was thinking of Rodney King.
Oh, okay. Well, now we know. All right. See you
in a bit.
You know where. Yeah.